Hey, EcBio team. I wanted to create a video, especially since we're not going to be meeting this week and we are going to be starting the project for Human Impacts, SCP-8. So I wanted to give a little bit of guidance on this, and then please reach out to me, Kelly, Tobin, or Ryan this week or next on the project. All right. So Thursdays are going to be our late arrival day. Students are doing the CCF. They have the review guide they're going to get. I was going to introduce parts of the project today as well. So I'm going to show this video on biodiversity here on my slides. This is slides 59. The biggest problem of our time, 3 minutes. David Attenborough does a really good job at showing hey, there is a huge problem in terms of the amount of species that are decreasing on Earth. I'm going to show the slide on why biodiversity is important. It's about the resilience of an ecosystem. And then with this diagram here. And then for this project, we're going to be framing it with this acronym of CHIPPO. It's not something students necessarily need to memorize, but it is a helpful framework they're going to be using for the project. So these are just the different ways that humans could impact climate change. Impact biodiversity. So we got climate change, habitat loss, invasive species, population, pollution, and overharvesting. And here's a definition of them. Here's specifically how they would lead to a decrease in biodiversity. All right. So on that first day, I was going to do CCF, just say hey, here's the study guide. We'll have some time in class to work on them, but then mostly just introducing kind of the framework before we get to the project. On the calendar, the next day is when we're going to introduce the project. So if I go to my slides, I decided, even though students don't need to know CHIPPO, I was going to do a little warm up on having them recall these, do something to prep for the summit if I haven't finished this, and then we're going to introduce the project. So the purpose of this project, the way we're introducing it, the angle we're coming at it from is, hey, human impact, climate change, human impacts on biodiversity is the biggest existential problem of our time. And there's so much that we could go and talk about with it. It could be a whole semester college course. We can't do that. So what we're going to do, and what a lot of scientists do, is that they meet at these summits and they share the ideas that they've really specialized, so they could also figure out what everyone else is doing in the field. And that's what we're going to be doing in class. So I'm going to show them this 5-minute video on the guy who wrote Drawdown. And I think it does a really good job at showing how you could kind of think forward thinking about these things. But I also like it because, and every slide I'm going to is not helpful for this, at certain points, for instance, right here, he will just highlight, just very few things in his presentation. So just kind of showing hey, kind of less is more in your slides. You're going to be sharing, talking about most of the things that you're saying. So it's a 5-minute video. I think it does a really good job at kind of explaining, hey, this is what we're going for in this presentation. And I think the info from the Drawdown guy is really interesting too. So then we'll introduce the project itself. So they're going to work in groups of 3 to create a TED Talk style presentation that explains how humans are impacting biodiversity. There's the research part of it where they have that doc with their sources, and then the presentation itself. There's 2 ways you could do this. You could do actual presentations. Right now in the schedule, it's Wednesday, Thursday are the presentation days. Or I was talking to Kelly, and she's thinking of having the students do video recordings and then turning in those video recordings as a group. Both of those work. Also, one advantage of Kelly's way is, because she's going to have more time without the presentation day, she's going a little bit more depth into credible resources. So you could look at her resources on that I think she just sent out on email today as well. I'm going to try to do these presentations. And if I have about 9 groups, 2 days, 1 day it's 5 students, then it should take about 8 minutes. And that's going to be a very strict, after 8 minutes, you're done with the presentation. So telling groups to practice beforehand type of a thing. And I think it'll be a cool way for the students to learn about all these different parts related to, climate change and human impacts. So how we're going to do this as a group project, individual grade, is students are going to be graded together on the introduction, the hook, the call to action, and just in general, the creating a clear that first success criteria of it doesn't look good. All right. However, let's say I'm a student that's slacking and let's say all that stuff I just described was good in the group, but I'm person A and I just didn't do a great job, I could earn an approaching or developing. While if I'm a student and I was responsible for B and I did an excellent job, I would get a meets. So it's a way to hold students individually accountable and still work together. So the different roles that we have, and I guess it'd be students wouldn't be able to do groups of 4, but they could do groups of 2 and split up one of these things. But it's intended for groups of 3, and so person A is going to describe the issue with a model. Now remember, this skill is just SCP-8, but they are going to be using other scientific practices. So for instance, like developing a model. And so person A, they develop a model that describes the issue. Person B, they are going to be developing or showing data on the issue. Person C is more of not describing the issue like person A is, but hey, I'm going to use that same model and revise it to talk about what are the solutions to this issue. All right. So I think the best way to explain what this looks like is to show you guys the exemplar that's also on the calendar. And the example is just what we've been doing in class, right? Like humans burn fossil fuels, that's leading to climate change, that decreases biodiversity. So here is the prompt. This wouldn't be part of their exemplar. One thing I forgot to do before the exemplar is choosing the topics. Tobin and I worked on this, and we have about 11, potentially 12 in the future topics that students could choose from. We decided to give them a little bit of guidance on using CHIPO. So for instance, if they choose deforestation, we're telling them, hey, like we want you to focus on climate change and we want you to focus on habitat loss for those parts that humans can impact biodiversity on. And specifically for climate change, like your model is going to be based around climate change and your data is going to be not only on climate change, but habitat loss. Maybe it's something different if I'm doing like soil health, right? But again, it helps give them a little bit of guidance. Okay. For those models, it could be a cause and effect type of model, or it could be more of like a systems model. Either one works. And on the exemplar, I include both. So students will have an idea of what we're looking for. Okay. So let's look at the exemplar. And again, the example that I'm doing here is just one we've already talked about. And here's the guidance that students would get on which parts of CHIPO they're doing. And here's my introduction. All right, where I'm going to just show this video, and over the span of 100 years, we see that the planet gets warmer and warmer. Okay, we have a problem. So then person B would go. And again, you don't have to go ABC. You could go in any order. I guess you couldn't do C first, but person B is going first. And here's the data that they're presenting. And notice that here's the sources for the data. One thing is that we do not want students to just have like all their information just like that they're going to say on the slide. I think a good rule that I've heard my students say, I don't know if they've gotten it from English, business, or wherever, is they're like, oh, is it the 6 and 6 rule? This idea that you shouldn't have more than 6 bullet points, and for each bullet point, it shouldn't be more than 6 sentences. So I think this does a good job at following those rules. But in terms of like earning a rigorous enough grade, students should, have more. And so that doesn't come in their slides, it comes in their presentation. So during their presentation, I'll be marking like, hey, are they going into depth, explaining what these graphs are, what they show, in a good way. Now, we were also talking about as a team that we're working on this unit, what about those students that just have difficulty presenting? And maybe, like they could have shown that mastery, but they just got stage fright. So one thing we're telling students to do, and I think this will help them prepare for the presentation, is they are literally going to have the notes right here saying what they are planning to say. So if I'm a student, I get stage fright, I don't say it during the presentation, as long as it's here, they could earn, that second success criteria right here. All right, so they'd put their name, topic, sentence, and kind of like what they would say to support it. All right, so as we go on, this could be maybe maybe a mix between person B and A, where we're just showing, hey, fossil fuels. That explains why we would see an increase in carbon in the atmosphere. What about temperature, though? So this is where person A definitely comes in. And I'm going to show you 2 different types of models. Here's a cause and effect model. Here's a more of a systems model. Students do not need to do both, all right? But I'm including both so students have an idea of either or. So let's say we're describing the issue. Okay, how do we know carbon dioxide is affecting temperature? Oh, the greenhouse effect. right? Kind of this idea of cause and effect, one thing leading to another, right? Comparing it to with higher levels of CO2, all right? And again, here's the notes of how they would describe what's going on here in their presentation, all right? Or they could do a systems model where here, we have the carbon cycle that we've been talking about, and then they show like, hey, we've been burning fossil fuels. I even like added an animation like here's before, here's now type of a thing. So it doesn't need to be super complicated, but it should be effective in what they're communicating. And again, the whole goal of this project is to explain how is this affecting biodiversity, not just like this is what humans are doing, how's it affecting biodiversity? So many species cannot adapt fast enough to changing climate, they go extinct, decreasing biodiversity. I would say this would still be person B in this case, but person A in this case. All right, now we might go back to person B because remember from this prompt, they still need to show data on the human population aspect of CHPO. So here we see that over the past decade, the amount of people that have been displaced due to a natural disaster has increased. And so we could say, okay, well, this is, affecting human populations, the demands that they're having on the planet ecosystem and just like our general well-being. And then we get to person C, the solutions on the issue. So notice it's the same model I had right here, but now I'm adding to this model. Hey, to solve this problem, let's not put CO2 in the atmosphere. Let's find ways that we could take carbon from the atmosphere. And that's where they would do their research, right? Like what are ways you could do that? Oh, we could do clean energy, solar, wind, hydroelectric. I didn't give specifics for this one right here or this one right here because different projects might actually have students research these, so I didn't want to give them away. But that kind of gives you an idea. And again, here are, in this case, the notes on what a student might say about this section. Here's the action statement. I wanted students to be creative with it, and sometimes I just copy what I put, so I just gave like Lorem Ipsum here, but they do need that action statement. And then the work cited. I think it could be helpful for Navy students to separate it by like which sources did they specifically use. And yeah, so here's the exemplar. Please, please, please reach out to me, to Kelly, to Tobin, to Cora on the project. Hopefully this video gives you some guidance moving forward with starting this project. And I'll see you guys for like our normal team meeting next Tuesday. All right, bye.